for time of supply, and we will discuss like how important time of supply, and later okay, we moved on to the tax invoice, because tax invoice is mandatory. Without that, you are not able to find out the time of supply, and as well as when you can file the returns. Everything is depend on that. So value of supply. So that's the reason tax invoice is mandatory for all the registered suppliers or dealers. They need to, because it is required even when you're dealing with non-registered recipients or suppliers, or with the composite scheme of suppliers everywhere. To get the tax input tax credit, if you want, then tax invoice is needed. So you know, so next we covered this in the previous class. Okay, so importance of tax invoice also we discussed, and we discussed about tax invoice or a bill of supply be issued by the registered person, where the time with related to the goods. This is also we have added today, which is similar to supply involvement of goods, which says that invoice in case of supply of goods. Supply involves a movement of goods, yes and no. So invoice issued before or at the time of removal of the goods for supply of recipient is considered. If the movement of goods includes supply, then invoice issued before or at the time. These all things we discussed. So this is okay. Okay, we discussed this. These are all the section 12 and section 13. Last class we discussed, and we have discussed time of supply of goods. Okay, so here we discussed like which one to take. What is the time of supply, and we discussed this. This is the easiest one to remember. Earliest of the following. In the case, section 12 deals with time of supply of goods. I'm talking services. We will discuss later. Time of supply of goods. So here you look at earliest of the following. So date of issue of the invoice with respect to the supply, when the invoice is issued, tax invoice is issued, or the last date on which he is required to issue. The last date on which he is required to issue means, for goods there are 30 days. Within 30 days, on the 31st day, at least he has to issue the invoice. Okay, so that rule is there. So out of this two, whichever is earlier, one you are going to take, and one is date of receipt of payment with respect to, or the date of payment when the supplier received the payment. So out of these two, earliest will be considered as the time of supply. The day on which the supply is done is considered. Okay, so here you saw that goods by small taxpayers whose turnover is less than 55 crores, 1.5 crores, and the previous you saw that which is more than 1.5 crores. So here you look at we discussed this, whose supply is less than 1.5 crores. In the previous class we discussed this. Supply of goods is yes. Opted for composition scheme, no. Then it has to go with the time of supply will be invoice issued before. So if the invoice is issued, or at the time of removal, when the goods are moved, okay, to the recipient, okay, whichever is earliest will be considered. If the supply of goods less than 1.5 crore, but he has opted for a composition scheme, and if somebody who has less than 1.5 crore or more than 1.5 crores supply is done, then this on the left side you could see the time of supply will be date of invoice or date of receipt, whichever is earlier. So date of issue of the invoice or the date of receipt when the receipt is received by the recipient. So whichever is earlier is considered. Okay, so this is with related to the services. Okay, this is with, so far we discussed about goods, and now we are discussing the time of supply of services. So which deals with the 13. This we didn't discuss in the previous class. This is today we are discussing section 13. So here time of supply of services. So here you look at that. Okay, invoice issued less than 30 days from the supply of services. Okay, in certain cases what happens? Certain services are within 30 days. There is a time of 30 days. Okay, need to be how it is happening in the goods also 30 days. Only in case of services like a bank, insurance companies, or non-banking finance companies which are providing service, they have 45 days. Less than 45 days or equal to 45 days, okay, they have to issue the invoices. They have to issue the invoices from the for the services. So you look at the center. The invoice issued 30 days, issued less than or equal to 30 days from the supply of service. If the supply has been done, okay, a service is be provided. So what is the day, last date before which they have to issue the invoice? So if it is not done within 30 days, no, then the time of supply will be date of provision of supply or service. Means date of provision is something which on which they have to issue 30 days within the limit, or date on which the supplier receives the payment, whichever is earlier is considered. The time of supply will be considered like that. Time of supply equal to date of provision of service, okay, or date on which the supplier receives the payment, okay, whichever. Or in case, because if in the problem it is given that the supply is done by the banking company, bank, then please remember it's not 30 days, it's going to be 45 days. If in the sum it has been given that uh, this service is given provided by the insurance company or NBFC, then you have to consider not 30 days, 45 days of time. Okay, is the maximum duration on which the invoice needs to be issued. So if the invoice is issued within 30 days, yes, if it is, that is yes, the date of supply will be date of issue of services. Sorry. Okay. So here, if it is issued within 30 days, if it is yes, then date of issue of invoice or date on which the supplier receives the payment, whichever is earlier. The time of supply which we are going to consider, you know, is date of issue of invoice, when the date of issue when the invoice is issued, or the date on which the supplier receives the payment. Out of these two, the whichever is earlier will be considered. Because why the time is very important in GST is that every, see, depend on the turnover, the supplier has to file the returns. Monthly returns is there, quarterly returns is there, and one annual return is there. So that's the reason very important. If whatever transaction have been done in this month, so within the next month, the like when before 20th and all, he has to file the returns. That all details should go. That's the reason it's very important to have, the time of supply. Okay, not just the value of supply like in the previous chapter we discussed. Yeah, very important. Value is required. What is the value? We need to compute first the value, because on that GST is applicable. Unless we know the value, we cannot take the GST rate. GST. So that is also very important. Finding the tax value, supply value, value of supply is important. Now here, time is also very important. Okay, so it's now you look at in an easy way. Okay, this is same thing. Please, I mentioned this also. This also. I wish that which is easy, please follow. I think this will be much easier for you to remember. Okay, you use this. This flowchart, you can use it. But I have given even at the later part of the slide, I have mentioned in theoretically also separately. In theoretically, all I have summarized. Please go through. Okay, I recommend you to please go through, because I wanted to give you all three options. One is this, one is this, and one more in detail in a write up. Okay, so whichever is comfortable, please go through. Okay, look at the same thing. This is also the same. Earliest of the following. The time of supply will be of services, because we are dealing, section 13 deals with the services. So earliest of the following. So you look at here. Invoice issued within time, 30 days slash 45 days. You know that there, for rest all services 30 days. On certain services like banking, insurance, NBFCs, all are related are 45 days. So here, so what is the time of supply? We look at invoice issued within the time. Okay, if the invoice is issued by the supplier within the time, issue of the invoice or receipt of the payment, whichever is earlier. Out of these two, issue of the invoice or receipt of the payment, whichever is out of these two, will earliest one will be considered as the time of supply. Second, invoice is not issued within 30 days, means 30 days or 45 days. Within that period, if the invoice is not issued in that period, so provision of the service, okay, or receipt of the payment. So provision of the service, okay, on the when the service is provided, or receipt of the payment. So out of these two, earliest one will be considered. In case invoice itself is not issued, okay, in case invoice is not issued at all, then the date of receipt in the recipient's book. Okay, example, invoice itself is not issued for the service given. So in that case, what happens? Which is the time of supply? When what I have to consider as the time of supply? Then it is should consider the date of recipient's receipts in the recipient book. Okay, example, I have supplied, and on the date on which the receiver has recorded in his book, so that date will be considered as a time of supply. Okay. Okay, so these are things are there. Before I'll go to the this slide, because this slide deals with goods as well as goods and services. Now, section 12 we discussed, which relates to the time supply of goods. Section 13 deals with the time supply of services. So this section, this deals with, okay, section 12 subsection 3 and section 13 subsection 3 deals with reverse. Okay, time of supply and goods and services with related to reverse charge. You know the reverse charge. Okay, it is on the forward charge. Previous slides, everything is a normal transaction. This is with a reverse charge where recipient has to pay the, not the supplier has to pay the GST. The recipient is going to pay the GST. In those cases, what time of supply, time of supply is considered. So on the left side, you could see the supply of goods. On the right side of the flow chart, you could see the time of supply of services. So look at the left side, the supply of goods under section 12 subsection 3 of the Central GST Act 2017. So in the case of reverse, I have clearly mentioned in the bracket, in the case of reverse charge. So look at what is whichever is considered as earliest. The date of receipt of goods on the date on which the goods have been received. Next, the date of payment as entered in the books of accounts of the recipient, or the date on which the books of the payment is been received in the books of account of the recipient, or the date on which the payment is debited in his bank account, whichever is earlier. Either the on the date when the entry has been made in the recipient books, or the date on which the his account has been debited. Okay, because it is charged by the recipient, agree, not the supplier. So recipient has received the goods, and he has made the payment to the supplier. So his account is the amount is debited from his bank account. That date. Okay, whichever is out of this two, whichever is earlier one you have to take. And third one, date immediately following 30 days from the date of issue of the invoice by the supplier, or the date by 30 days completed on 31st date. 30 days over on 31st day. Okay, you should invoice you should have received, because that is the maximum time duration is given, okay, to issue the supply, issue the invoice in the related to the goods. So out of these three, whichever is earlier will be considered. So look at the supply side. So there comes associated enterprises, because there are some enterprises which are located outside India. Example, suppliers, associated enterprises. You read in the book, it is there. Associated enterprises. In the bracket is clearly mentioned. Supply of services located outside India. Okay, the supplier is located outside India. So in those cases only, the date of entry in the books of account of the recipient of the supply. Okay, so what about like the date on which the recipient, okay, recorded in his account, okay, the supply which he has received, or the date of payment which he has done, whichever is early, that date need to be considered. Example, that supplier supplied the goods, I am a recipient, I have received it. And associate enterprise means somebody from the abroad, outside the country, he has sent a supply, given the service, I have received it. Okay, so which is the time of supply? Okay, the date of the entry in the books, in the recipient, in my account, I am a receiver, in my books of account, the date when I've done the entry of the supply, that, or the date on which I made the payment to the supplier, whichever is early out of these two will be earliest will be considered. In every other case apart from this, other cases, in other cases, date of payment by the recipient. Example, I'm a receiver of the service, I made the payment, date of payment, or date immediately following 60 days from the date of issue of the invoice of the supplier, or within 60 days. Okay, 60 days means 60 61 day Immediately following 61 means 60 means 61. Immediately following 60 days, okay, from the date of issue of the invoice by the supplier. Example, the supplier has issued the bill. From that date, 60 days. On 61 date, I have to consider whichever is earlier, date of payment or 61st date. From the date of issue of the invoice, whichever is earlier need to be considered. So this is with relate. See, this is being segregated now. See, this is combined. I have shown you the flow chart. This is only reverse charge with related to the goods. Please see this. Slide is time of supply of goods, reverse charge. Okay. So here, tax payable under the reverse charge is, this is simplification. Please, you can follow this. Okay, this you follow this for a better understanding. Tax payable under reverse charge. One is date of receipt of goods or date of payment or 31st day from the date of invoice, because 30 days is the maximum. On the next following of the 30 days means 31st day. So out of these three, earliest will be considered. Date of receipt of goods on the day when the receipt you have received the goods, or the day when you made the payment, or on 31st day from the issue of the tax invoice. Okay, so out of these three, which is the earliest date is considered as the time of supply. If not possible, see, in above three cases also, if it is not possible, if not possible under any of the above option, the data of the entry in the books of accounts of the recipient. Out of above three, these three above here which you are looking, in these three category also you are not able to find out the time of supply. If it is not available, then the date on which you have entered in the books of accounts, yours, recipient, because we are dealing with reverse charge, So the date on which the books of accounts in the recipient's books is considered as the time of supply. And this is time of supply of services. Previous one was the goods. This is services which related to the reverse charge. So here, how earliest of the following, which is earliest of the following? Payment made within 60 days, because services is 60 days. Payment made within 60 days. Then what is example in the problem it is given? The payment is done from the date of issue 60 days. So date of payment entered in the books, okay, or date when the debit on book bank. So you look at payment made within 60 days. If the payment is made within 60 days of the issue of the tax invoice, so date of payment entered in the books of account of the recipient. So what is the date of entry is made in the receiver's book, or on date when your bank account is debited. Out of these two, whichever is earlier date is there, that you have to consider as the time of supply. If the payment is not made within 60 days, okay, payment not made within 60 days, 61st day from the date of invoice. So 61st day from the date of invoice is considered as the time of supply. Then associated entries, cross-border transaction. Associated entity means is a supplier is a outside India guy. So in that case, date of entry in the books, your books, or date of payment which the receiver has made it, whichever is earlier, is considered. If not possible under any of the above options, okay. So you just ignore this now. See, you have to ignore the last one, associated entity. In the remaining two you are seeing on the left side, agree. So in those two cases only, if not possible under any of the above options other than the associated entity, the date of entry in the books of accounts of the recipient. Example, payment within 60 days is not available information. Payment not made within 60 days also not available. Then in these two cases, if those both the information is not available in that case, okay, the date of entry in the books of account when it is made, that is considered as a time of supply. Okay, so these all comes in the related to the recipient, because here recipient reverse charge means what? The receiver of the service or receiver of the goods is paying the GST, not the supplier. Usually what happens, supplier who supplies the goods and he issues the tax invoice over there, the GST will be there, he will make the payment GST. Okay, but here what happens, reverse charge, where in cases the suppliers are usually are the not registered ones, and outside people like associated entities and all. So in that case, the recipient of the supplies or the goods or the services need to make the GST payment. So that's the reason we call it as a reverse charge. So please, I recommend twice or thrice you have to read this. Okay. So then only you will able to. So I would recommend this. This is a very easy form to to understand. This is easy. compared to this. You might get confused in this. So this flow chart, the simple flow chart, I recommend you to use. So let's look at a few examples, because time of supply. Okay, we have discussed all these things. Now supply of goods more than 1.5 crores, less than 1.5 crores. Now we discuss in the PPT. Let's look at the example. Okay, then you will have a better understanding. Okay, I hope it is in your screens. Laptop is visible clearly, but in the mobile phones, I don't know how far it will look clearly. But I have shared this book with you so that you can anytime go back and refer. My advice is always is that please go through these examples. These are the problems. This is sufficient. If you are able to understand this and you are able to read this and remember, you can able to solve the problems. These are the solved problems. Let's look at the example. P of Chennai. P of Chennai supplies goods to B to a goods to B of Bangalore. P has to send the goods for delivery from Chennai to Bangalore. P sends the goods to B on 30th October 2017. Turnover of P in the previous year was 2 crores. Find out the time of supply in the following different scenarios. So P is in Chennai and B is in Bangalore. P is supplying to the B who is in Bangalore and his turnover is 2 crores. We know that there are two things we discussed. In case where the turnover is more than 1.5 crores and where the turnover is less than 1.5 crores. And P has sends the goods on to the B on 30th October 2017. Okay, so here the information is available. First column talks about removal of the goods. Okay, second column date of issue of the invoice. Third, last date for issue of the tax invoice. So which is the last date by which you have to issue the tax invoice. Fourth, date on which payment is made, payment is entered in the books of account. The date on which the payment is entered in the books of account. Next comes the fifth one, fifth column, date on which payment is credited in the bank account. Sixth column, which you are going to consider as which out of these 5 columns you are going to consider as the time of supply. And what is the criteria you have chosen? Last one, criteria for determining the time of supply. Which is the criteria you have chosen? Okay, to select the time of supply. Okay, let's look at the first one. Removal of the goods is 30th October. Date of issue of invoice is 30th October. Last date for issue of the tax invoice is 30th October. Date on which the payment is entered in the books of account is 31st October. Date on which the payment is credited to the bank account is 1st November. So what is the date I have taken as the time of supply? 30th October. 30th October. What is the criteria I have considered here? Date of issue of supply. So date of issue. So I have considered here 30th October as the time of supply. Why I have considered date of issue of invoice. Look at the date of issue of invoice. So this one is considered here. Okay. Date of issue of invoice. Because you look at removal of goods 30th is happened. But date of issue of the invoice is 30. Last date is 30. Date on which the payment is entered 31st. You have to ignore. So what is the time? On the date when the bill is generated, issue is done, because even the goods have been also removed on same day itself. So that's the reason in those case you have all the different parameters. So you have to choose date of issue of the invoice. Second case, look at removal of the goods 30th October, date of issue of the invoice 2nd November. Okay, and last date for issue of the tax invoice is 30th October, and date of which the payment 31st, date of payment is credited to bank on 1st. So time of supply will be 30th October. But what is the criteria I have taken here? Last date of issue of the invoice. So this one, last date, okay, last date for issue of the tax invoice. Because see here, removal of goods is 30, date of issue of the invoice, when is the invoice is issued? 2nd November they have issued the invoice. Okay, but actually last date and the payment is done 31st and payment credited in the bank account 1st, all those things are later dates. But what you are going to see in this example is that last date for issue of the tax is 30th only. So after that, no, because last date to issue that your bill is 30th, so you have issued that. and that is the date you have to consider as a time of supply. Okay, not that removal of the goods. Okay, next case, removal of the goods 30th October, date of issue of the tax invoice is 28th October, then last date for issue of the tax invoice is 30th October, date of the payment is 27, date on which payment is credited to bank account is 26th October, time of supply is 20. See, time of supply is considered 26. Why? Because date on which the payment is credited to bank account is considered. You look at all the rest of the dates. Goods have been removed on 30th October. Date when the bill is issued, 28th. Date on which the issue of the tax invoice, 30th. Invoice is issued on 30th. Bill is date of issue of the invoice, 28th. Okay. And date on the payment of the is entered in the books of account is 27th. When the amount is credited, 26th. So compared to all the dates, the supplier has received the money by 26th only. That means that, okay, before you issued the invoice, before you issued the last date, there is a date is fixed to issue the invoice, or when the goods you supplied, removal of the goods 30th October. Before that, only before that, all these dates you have received your to your bank account. The money has been credited to your bank account. That means you have received early for that supply. So then the time of supply will be considered as date on which the payment is credited to bank account. So earliest, because what we are looking at is the earliest of the available options, earliest of the dates. Okay. So please look in here. So these three cases also, the time of supply changes and the criteria which we are chosen is changed. First case, date of issue of the invoice we considered. In the second case situation, we considered last date of the issue of the this one. Okay. Third, we consider date when the bank account supplier's account has been credited with the money from the recipient. Receiver has paid the payment, and by 26th October only he has received. But actually 30th October is the date on which the goods have been sent. Okay. So this gives you a clarity that so which is the time of, because you can't say the time of supply is same for all three situations. You look at based on the dates, you have to finalize which is the time of supply. Okay. So this is which tells you three different situations. In these different situations, criteria for determining the time of supply varies. Okay. So I have only 1 minute left now. Okay. So few more examples are there. We'll study in the next class. Few more examples we'll go through. And next topic is their place of supply. In this same chapter, we are going to discuss about place of supply, location, because that is also very important. The supplier's location and the receiver's location, okay, is also very important because we are dealing with intra state or interstate export import. All those things are there. No, that's the reason very important even finding out. So value of supply anyhow we have studied in the previous chapter. All those examples which is there in this book, please refer and remember.